They're not as bad.
Yeah. And I hate it.
We're from Charles. The first time we played Skeleton Crew. Yeah. Yeah. They must have figured something out.
Oh, that one. In the little house.
Yeah.
I think they're related to.
They did a lot of shots. Joint game. They didn't have it.
Yeah. I would think so.
They didn't know
Yeah. It took about a month, they just assembled that. That's what we couldn't figure out. Because it's far enough off the road and out of the way, that even when they come down and go to the garden, it shouldn't have been there. I figured this was. I figured. Oh,
It is good.
That's why we played it. Well,
It's stepped out inside.
it's supposed to come down 3/4.
Takes about 20 hours of my work every week.
Yeah. The last time I heard that, we had that man.
All right.
Yeah. That was probably a year ago. And oh, I hate those things. I do too. And had you,
Oh, no, I mean, it's.
you didn't know.
Yeah, well, and then,
Yeah. And that, why they didn't make that before they did all the other work is beyond me. And they could have went down Edmonton Road, straight out to the garden. It was all one house.
We've got a growing collection of these.
I bet.
If people don't get them back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Dark when I was by it, so.
I don't know. I know, I spotted that sign, and I made John go mad. I did too, and I took a picture of it, I did too.
Mark, are you the vice chair? Oh, it's Linda, that's right.
I have not heard from him, I'm assuming he's.
Did you
gonna
bring your
fly.
gavel glove tonight? Know how you like to, I wouldn't want you to get a blister,
Oh,
or a splinter.
Do I need to- we need to go ahead and call?
Oh, I think, well, it's only just now 6. It's up to you guys. We could give Roger a minute or two.
Sometimes he'll fly in here, and I
Yeah.
haven't heard from him, so I'm assuming he's going to come.
Yeah.
We'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
okay.
Got awful quiet though.
Like church.
Give us a word, Dave.
You guys see his shadow?
Yeah.
You do see him?
There he is.
Oh, praise the Lord.
Sorry, Kate said it was exciting today.
I said I haven't heard from him. I'm sure he's coming.
My apologies.
That's all right. No problem.
Should we call this meeting to order?
Yes.
Roll call.
Templin?
Yep.
This
Lane?
conference will now be recorded.
Sorry about that.
I'll start over. Templin?
Yes.
Lane?
Yes.
Huggins?
Yes.
Milburn?
Yes.
Maddock?
Yes.
Schultz?
Yes.
All commissioners are present today.
Thank you. So, general business 3A, approve the planning commission agenda. Any changes or corrections, additions to be made?
Do we need to make a correction for the new planning commission member?
Well, is that an action item on here today?
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. It should have been as an item on the general business agenda, so you can just add that as you see fit.
All right, why don't we make that new item B? Any objections?
Nope.
Okay.
Make a motion to a plan, meeting commission notes,
Approve the
to
planning
approve
agenda.
planning commission meeting notes.
Second?
The agenda is modified, right?
Yes.
Moved and seconded?
Yes.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. New item 3B, introduction of a new planning commission.
We can do it.
Well, hi. Good evening.
You have your own?
Just put this right here for you to sign. Okay. Forward. Put your left hand on the Bible, right hand up, and just repeat after me.
Okay.
I state your name.
I, Chad Martin,
Do hereby solemnly affirm
do hereby solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully uphold
that I will faithfully uphold
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas
and the Constitution of the State of Kansas
in the performance of my duties.
and the performance of my duties.
I will faithfully and impartially
I will faithfully and impartially
perform all the duties of an appointed member
of all the duties of the appointed member
of the Planning Commission of DeSoto, Kansas,
of the Planning Commission of DeSoto, Kansas,
under pains and penalties of perjury.
under pains and penalties of perjury.
Welcome to the commission, Chad. Sorry for the late introduction. So Chad was appointed by the mayor with consent of the council last week to fill Todd's unexpired term, which actually expires in April. And he's also committed for that following term as well. So
Do we get to swear him again in April?
nope, there's just one swearing, and you just witnessed it. So.
Welcome. Thank you.
Oh, there might be more than one swear, but not.
Yeah, correct.
Not that kind.
Welcome.
Item 3, now C, approval of minutes of planning commission meeting held January 28th, 2025. Any changes or corrections or additions to be made?
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Okay, Chad, this is your moment to shine. Item D, disclosure of conflicts of interest. This is if you have a conflict of interest of anything on the agenda for tonight. Anyone have anything to disclose?
Yeah, I would have to excuse myself from item 6B. Old business.
Okay. Anything else? Item 3E, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. You had discussions outside of the commission on matters pertaining to what's on the agenda tonight. I should probably have some mention of the fact that I am at least aware of potential Geiger transaction, but at this point I don't think I know anything that makes me conflict of interest to discuss that, so. If it becomes that way, I will let you know.
Fair enough.
Anything else? Okay. Item 4, call the public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda today may do so at this time. Any presentations for informational purposes only. No action will be taken. There's a 4-minute time limit. Anyone like to address the planning commission tonight? Seeing none, I assume we have no online visitors.
That's correct.
I will close the call to the public. Item 5A, public hearing. Consider rezoning from C2 to M1, 10680 Evening Star Road.
All right, thank you, Chairman. As you correctly stated, we have a rezoning request from C2 to M1 at 10680 Evening Star Road. This property, actually, this tract was brought before you in May of last year, and it was annexed into the city, and the entire tract was zoned C2 at that time. So you can see the existing zoning is C2 Business General. It's got county designated zoning to the west and east, and also to the south. North is actually also in the city limits of DeSoto, but has not been rezoned, so it still carries the RUR county zoning, but it is also part of the city limits of DeSoto. Staff has met with the applicant to discuss the rezoning, and as of this date, have not heard any comments from the general public after posting the signs, advertising in the paper, and then also sending out notifications to surrounding landowners. As you can see, we talked about this previously. The existing zoning map does show the current tract, and then on page 3, the surrounding area shows the tract under consideration, which is the southern tract, and it is being proposed to be changed to M1 Light Industrial. You probably also noticed in your packet that there is also a special use permit pending this rezoning application, and we will be talking about that a little bit later in the agenda. But this is focusing on the rezoning of this tract specifically from C2 to M1. I'll go through some of the zoning compatibility factors. As talked about, it's 38 acres. It's currently zoned C2. It is farm ground at this point. As we've all talked about, this Southwest Growth Area, which is this part of, is transitioning to a much higher and more denser use. This certainly falls in line with what the comprehensive plan and our long-term vision for this area has been thought about and contemplated for over 20 years for DeSoto as the Sunflower redevelopment has moved forward. One of the things that we seem to always get, I don't want to say hung up on necessarily, but it's almost about the utilities and the roadway network. At this point, it's Evening Star has been improved, the interchange is improved, there's a traffic circle there, but it does stop just south of 103rd Street, and it is a gravel road from that point on. So the roads really aren't designed to support this type of use, but once again, the special use permit, there's discussions that we will be having with the applicant and also bringing forth that to the Planning Commission in the future. Utilities, there is a water main at 103rd and Evening Star. There is a residence that's further south, so there is some sort of service line going south on Evening Star Road, but it does not have adequate water supply at this time for that location. So it has a negative connotation with that. So, and we've been talking about these utility issues for quite some time, but once again, as the Chairman's pointed out, this is a land use discussion, and we're not getting into the specifics of things that might be as part of a site plan or anything along those lines. So we are just looking at the potential change from C2 to M1 in this location. There are also several items in the staff report which I did cover. One of the most important things that we looked at is as I mentioned, the comprehensive plan, but also the future land use plan. It does show that, at least my interpretation of that color, Commissioner Milburn called me and said the map might be a little off. It looks like it's white, that little square, but I believe it's supposed to be gray. So it really matches up pretty well with the proposed uses that we have at least contemplated with this body on the future land use. You'll also note that Evening Star Road is on the map as an expressway that will ultimately, or at least with DeSoto's future land use plan, we're showing headed south and will connect ultimately on I-35. That has not been determined. This is only just a line on the map, but certainly that connection is something that's been discussed not only with Johnson County Commission and staff members, but also the Kansas Department of Transportation as well. So this is DeSoto's proposed location for that, which is right along this road. But at this time, that's a very long-term item, and it is something that needs to be considered in this rezoning application, but once again, it's not an overriding factor as far as staff is concerned. I just wanted to point that out. So with that, I will stand for any questions you may have, and the applicant is here tonight, so, and there's some questions if for them, they might also want to provide some information.
Thanks, Brad. Questions for Brad? Seeing nothing leap out, I would suggest opening the public hearing. Anyone who'd like to be heard on this application, please approach the podium, give us your name and address for the record.
We don't bite.
Hard. Hard.
Yeah.
Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Matters before the planning commission. Discussion?
Well, I guess my question is, we've seen a lot of concrete plants. I fully understand these are two separate issues, but one's predicated on the other, so I feel like they should be looked at together. Like, we just approved a special use permit for concrete of the Panasonic plant, and then I guess a year ago we did the same thing for that batch plant right off of 83rd. I'm just wondering, is there enough demand for another plant? I guess and maybe that's directed at the applicant. I don't know.
I think this applicant here is the same one that was approved at Panasonic.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a absolutely appropriate question when we get to the SUP. The question for us is whether this location is an appropriate use for an M1 zone.
Well, fair. My question is, my understanding, the way that Brad phrased it, is that the SUP is only on the table if the zoning request is approved.
That's true.
So that's why I was kind of saying, like, do they go kind of together?
Yeah, we have to consider any potential use that might be available in M1. Is that
fair?
Is that a good place?
Yeah, I was going to just mention that, Chairman, that, yeah, we have to look at all the uses that are potentially available in M1 in this, but you're right, it is the concrete batch plant that is sort of driving this.
The only concern I've got is we've got, what, 6,000 acres at the old ammunition plant, and then we've got the Flint development across the street, they're always already M1. Why aren't we using part of that for this instead of trying to make new M1? That was my only concern on the whole thing.
So perhaps we have too much M1, you could use what we already have.
Yeah.
Okay, good point.
Guess my only concern would be if that is, I mean, it is showing white. I guess that was a little concerning to me that, you know, what did we discuss back into, 2022 when we updated this future land use plan? Was that the intent for that to be M1 zoning on that spot?
Well,
I
the
can see
future land
that.
use map is instructive, but it's not binding.
No,
right? So
yeah, I agree.
The issue is that an appropriate place for that type of use? So we plan on having commercial all around it, right? That's the red?
Yeah, you're correct, Chairman. If, the zoning doesn't move forward ultimately with city council, I mean, it is already zoned C2, which is not the same zoning, but it's still a significant, business generation type of land use, not totally unlike what could be potentially there under an M1 use.
When would this all go into effect? I'm sorry if I'm speaking out
Oh.
of turn. When will that all go into effect?
I'm sorry, please approach the podium, your name and
Oh, no,
address.
no, I won't do that.
Okay, we're good then.
Well, I guess briefly I can tell you the planning commission will make a recommendation tonight and then it'll go to the city council. We have a 15-day protest period between the planning commission recommendation and the city council, so it'll be the second meeting in March that this would go to the city council, which is the 20th, is that right, Mike?
March 26th.
26th, okay.
No, I'm sorry, 27th.
Okay, anyway, late
I
March.
have no idea. Hold on, let me look at the calendars.
Oh, it's
It's the
20th. 20th.
Correct. Sorry. 20th.
So Brad, where's the south city limit line? Is it that?
Yeah, it is at this southern line is the south city limit, at least on the west side of Evening Star. But of course, it goes all the way down to 143rd on the Sunflower property, Astra.
So that dashed area is county ground.
Yes. Yeah, south of that blue dashed line up there, that's the bottom part of DeSoto city limits. West of Evening Star, and then it follows Evening Star straight down, which on the east side is within DeSoto city limits.
So Brad, in your report, you kind of said service availability or
Yeah, this is-
services is
yeah.
not something the city takes into account for zoning.
Well, we
It's-
look at it, it's one of those criteria that, we do make an evaluation, and right now, there aren't any, the road's gravel, and there aren't any water mains going south on Evening Star, so it, wouldn't, the existing road system and at least the water system is not adequate for this type of use. Certainly, those things can be installed and upgraded, which is something we would be talking about in the SUP. So once again, I don't want to cloud or cross over too much, but we do have to keep that in mind, that there is going to be those types of discussions and requirements that would be placed on this property if the SUP was to move forward.
Yeah, I was thinking, obviously, water is going to be important. Fire service, I assume the leasing of this would be by the sheriff.
Correct.
And
As it is now. It's DeSoto's policed by the sheriff, and this is obviously
sewers would have to be provided by the city.
correct.
These,
And this is Water District 7 territory.
yeah. I assume electricity shouldn't be a big problem. They're gonna
Seems to be a lot of that around.
probably need gas out there. These things that aren't provided by the city, we don't take into account before we annex a piece of ground into the city.
Well, we certainly look at all those factors, but once again, if this is part of our overall growth and development plan, it's our assumption, we would like to be in charge of how it grows. Those uses that are particular to those locations would be all part of our development plan.
We've closed the public hearing, but I assume the planning commission would reopen the public hearing just to hear you.
Well, I'm involved with the development of this property.
Name and address.
Dave Anderson, 9152 Shorewood Drive. Thank you. Just so you had some clarification, the 38 acres that we're asking you to look at as M1, obviously, we've had conversations with the Geiger folks, but the remaining 23 acres was, we have an intentional use to put in some smaller warehousing. And to your point, all the map up there that said there's a lot of extra ground, We've talked to the people at Astra currently. I'll just say they're not interested in a ready-mix plant right next to Panasonic, kind of, and their future vision for that. The Flint people are also engaged with other companies. They're under an NDA. So there is no other opportunity, honestly. It looks like a lot of ground, but it's gone. And these would be smaller warehouses, like 150,000 feet. They would just be part of it. And the last thing is, in their packet, when you see it, we've contacted Water One, and they've already undertaken a water study. There's adequate water there. We just have to build that infrastructure. We've talked to the city about a benefit district for the road. That would be the thing that we'd have to do before we develop. And although not all of the development needs it, natural gas is, well, it's a little bit of ways, but we've also talked to them, and I think that's in your packet. They have adequate resources too. So just to clarify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is that existing house that's on the properties to the north, I guess, is somebody living in that house still?
The home that's
Yeah.
on Evening Star, both of those homes were purchased in the first agreement, and the one on 103rd is vacant. And it's a son that lives there, and they've taken the barn down, and not exactly sure, it's probably 2 months before they're out.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not planning on perpetuating residential use.
No.
Further discussion? Oh, close the public hearing. Thank you. When it comes to utilities, when we're talking about these rezonings and the streets, et cetera, it's a really interesting proposition, I think, from the perspective of the planning commission, because the point of the zone is whether by giving this rezoning, you're going to throw a wrench into the overall expansion and development of the city. It's not that the services are all necessarily there, but is it consistent with what you expect the city's services to be? Same is true with annexation, and your point on the annexation is, in order to properly annex the property, you have to have a showing that you have the intention to provide the services to that annexed area. And obviously, the city has made that determination, so I don't think that we can look at these rezonings and say, well, because it doesn't have the road network necessarily to build it, it's an inappropriate use, if that use is consistent with the overall. So, at least that's my take. You are free to disagree with me.
No, I agree with you. The question is this an appropriate use for that tract of ground?
Yeah.
So, one thing that does trouble me when we do these, and Brad, maybe it's just a note for the future, is I don't remember off the top of my head what all can be in an M1. And I don't have that right in front of me. But I'm sure that there's a variety of uses that we probably ought to just, everyone's comfortable that's a potential thing that could develop there. Most of the ones that are noxious have special use permits, but.
Yeah, that is correct. This particular, if you want to get in the special use permit, under M2, heavy industrial would be allowed by right. And that's why the M1 is generally preferable by staff, because then gives the planning commission and city council an opportunity to dive down into the weeds at a lot of levels as far as what can be done at these locations and what kind of concerns that the both governing bodies have as far as over issuing a special use permit. But you can see a lot of those categories, as you do mention, Chairman, are the more obnoxious one are special use permit
This is
required.
extremely hard to read at this scale. But
Yeah.
so the column, the second to the right column on the screen is M1. So M2 is the far right, M1's the second. So where you see an S, that's special use permits required. Where you see a P, that is permitted. If it's blank, it's not permitted. So I don't know how fast you want me to scroll, but I'll scroll slowly. Looks like mining, Those categories under mining allowed by special use permits, utilities, some are permitted, there's one with a special use permit. Construction, heavy civil engineering, specialty trade contractors, special use permit. There's some parts of manufacturing allowed by special use permit, others are not. Wholesale trade, generally permitted. You can see the wholesale trade, retail trade, select retail trade are permitted. Transportation warehousing, generally permitted. Information permitted. You can see the rest there. Kind of hard to summarize, actually.
Brad, is there
Thank
a nice
Thank you.
line we could draw here, like M1 or M2 would allow outdoor storage and stockpiling of equipment and material, or where M1 might not, or
Yeah, I think that is, Mike, if you can find all, but the outdoor storage does require, off the top of my head, the special use permit as far as outdoor, lay down yards and those type of things.
So Brett, yeah, okay. Right. It's, I don't know that there's a clear distinction between outside storage. I think generally it needs to be screened in the industrial districts. I don't know if there's a big distinction between M1 and M2 on that.
But they are all governed by provisions in the site plan, which will have landscape buffers.
Yeah, there's
Screening and a lot of
correct
those.
me, I don't think there's any use within the M1 or M2 that doesn't at least require a site plan.
Correct.
So Brad, notices were sent out to all the neighbors in DeSoto and then also the county,
Yes,
and you had no calls.
correct.
you. Further discussion or motion? I guess I got a quick question. If there's no objection, I'll reopen the public hearing.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'm just trying to, Sean Madden, 40253 West 111th. So my understanding, that last statement, the neighbors and the stuff were aware, what I read on that was you only notify the people 1,000 feet from the location. There is nobody other than that house that moved out.
We didn't get it.
Yeah, we didn't get anything. I got something for the dog kennel that's further away than this, So as far as neighbors, of course you're not going to get any responses because if you didn't drive by it and see that sign, you didn't know it was going to happen. So I'll put that out there. So, and then another thing is you're pretty much just saying you're getting the M1 just to move on to the M2. You're getting your foot in the door just to advance and go bigger industrial. That's the overall plan is what I'm understanding. Is that what you just said? You're trying to get approved for M1, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he just mentioned M2, so.
If I could address your question is, the special use permit that we're going to discuss here is it was available in M1 zone. So the special use permit would not be, and it's one of those uses that we have to have a special permit for. It's not of right. M2, it would be of right. That's not where we're going with this.
Oh, okay.
M1 zone.
Can that be later on in the process?
Property could always be rezoned, but that's, what Brad has suggested, and I think his comments were that the city staff prefers the M1 to give us the opportunity to have special use permit process with these special uses.
Okay.
So I doubt very seriously they're gonna change their mind and start just willy-nilly granting M2s. We don't normally do that.
Okay. And I'm sorry about this last one. This is the only thing I came for, so I apologize. But to the Geiger Company, how many decibels do these plants usually put out in noise? Oh.
We have it enclosed. We enclose our plant to try to minimize that,
Mm-hmm.
along with the dust.
We have a study, but I don't remember it off the top.
Okay. Because you can hear dogs
We'll
bark
have
for
some
miles out
photos
there.
and all kinds of information here in a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the issue with the special use permit. This is the question of whether it's
Okay.
appropriate use of the land here.
All right. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the planning commission? This time I really am closing public.
Well, I mean, I think we're just,
Please approach the podium.
My name's Jelaine Hoggard. I live in the Dome Home, 39535 West 111th Street. Let's be honest, we're worried about what that's gonna do to the value of our property. You know, and if you take it that far south, are you gonna go across the street? You're gonna take our property too? You know, I mean, that's just human nature to wonder and to worry about that kind of thing. So, you know, I like, what am I trying to say? I love the country, I love the peace and quiet, you know, and I understand that, you know, time moves on and things move on, but leave me alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
I second that.
Yeah, she's my next door neighbor, so.
If you'd like to leave something on the record, this is your great time to do it. Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Matters before the board. Discussions, motions.
I still, I don't like the M1 designation, mainly because we just rezoned this to C2, kind of with, and what my interpretation was of the meeting, we used this as a buffer between that and the residential. I went back and actually listened to the meeting when we did that, and we didn't actually specifically say that's what it was, but there was a little bit of implied comments.
I mean, I have a motion, but I don't know if it's the one that anybody wants to hear. I'd make a motion to deny the zoning change from M1 or C2 to M1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? It's for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would agree with the motion, but it's usually these rezonings are kind of cut and dry. But it is in a location that it is moving more towards industrial type zoning. So I'm torn, but, you know, notices were sent out and the procedure was completed as it needed to be.
Charlie, are you willing to give an explanation for your thinking?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons, I think. Number one, it's on a dirt road. Number two, I did some quick math. I don't track all of your findings, Brad, but 25% were neutral and 16% negative, which is a high percentage compared to what we generally see in terms of favorability and non-favorability. I also think that it's going to be hard to get a very clear understanding of what the public opinion is, given the fact that it's a 40 or 60 acre tract that we're trying to rezone 38 acres. There's not too many residents close by. I like the C2. I think it fits with the future land use plan. I don't necessarily love the M1 because of what it could, even if it special use permit allows for us to take a look, see at what we're going to be doing. So for those reasons, I'm not in favor.
I guess, just my personal opinion is that commercial in that area is probably a long way. And I can certainly sympathize with not wanting people to move in or, start building things around me. Given the Panasonic plant in the industrial park, it seems to me that that's pretty illegal.
Yeah, my understanding is that they're planning on putting warehouses right there, which seems to me like a reasonable use. Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's why there's 7 of us, because we can have different opinions, and that's what it's good for.
Well, and I wanna make it clear that when we heard the Panasonic report on the TV, the first thing I did, we live on a little piece of ground on the east side. First thing I did was turn to my wife and said, where are you gonna move when we sell? Because, that's just the nature of this type of event, It's good for the city, to have this tax revenue. It's gonna be helpful for the people building the improvements that are bound to come. And it's unfortunate that, people who wanted to live out in the country, see the deers and turkeys and everything as we do, are imposed upon us to some degree, but I think that's the nature of development, and I would be in support, because I think this is, I think it's gonna be.
So, if our designated thoroughfare is gonna come down Evening Star Road, and as we've drawn our imaginary lines on the map, I mean, I do think the C2 zoning is appropriate along that corridor. The M1 is maybe a little less appropriate, because it's gonna front that thoroughfare. I don't know that it's inappropriate, and I think Mark made a good point when he says this isn't gonna happen overnight. It's gonna take a while before we see the commercial development on that. Lord knows nobody's put any money towards actually building our lovely lines on the map, so who knows when that's gonna be. I'm not opposed to the application, because I think it is an appropriate use of the property. As it relates to the overall, I would rather DeSoto stay the same or not be built out. I moved out here 32 years ago, and we were talking about the Wonderful World of Oz theme park. There was no mystery to me that there was once a giant ammunition plant that employed 20,000 people just south of where I live. So to think that it was going to sit fallow forever was probably a pipe dream. I've enjoyed these 32 years, but I also recognize the fact that this ground and its location is designed to develop, and it's going to. What I think is most important for the role of the Planning Commission is to try to put some order to it and see if we can do it in a way that is least intrusive. In my mind, this zoning, rezoning at this particular location does not perpetuate bad planning. It would fit, it's got good access. Yeah, the roads need to be improved, yeah, water needs to be taken to it, and those things will have to be done, but if this ends up being warehouses, that would not, to me doesn't mean you did a bad job of planning. So I think that's kind of my take on it. Further discussion? Motion has been made. Second. Ready to take a roll call on the motion? Motion is to recommend denial. Roll call.
Okay. Schultz,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Milburn,
No.
Higgins,
No.
Lane,
No.
Templin,
No.
Martin.
No.
Motion does
Fails.
not, motion fails.
Anyone like to make another motion?
Make a motion, recommend approval of the subject property on Evening Star Road from C2 to N1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Martin,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins,
Yeah.
Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
No.
Schultz.
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So this matter will proceed to the city council for action at the next city council meeting, which you said was the 20th.
Correct, yeah, it's on the 20th.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks for comments. Item 6A, old business. Continued text amendment on residential lot widths. Our old favorite.
All right, thank you, Chairman. After a lengthy discussion, and we zeroed in on the stormwater detention tracks being counted as part of the open space, there was concern that because it didn't specifically say where the amenities or recreational features could be, there was concern that they might conflict or be potentially put in a location that during a rain event or some sort of use that would be in conflict with the stormwater purpose itself. And so I did modify the language. Nothing changed from last time, except I did add the sentence, a dedicated amenity or recreational feature located on stormwater detention tracks shall be located outside of the stormwater detention storage basin area. So it can't be in that area. I mean, there's areas around it. And once again, what I sort of envision is like a trail going around the detention pond or something along those lines. I do, much as again, I wouldn't think that somebody would want to put a tennis court right in the middle of the detention pond, but stranger things I'm sure have happened. So this this language would give staff a little more teeth to say, no, this is not allowed, and require the amenity or recreational feature to, I guess, blend more within the stormwater areas if that's the developer's part of their development plan. So with that, I'd recommend approving the language that was submitted previously, plus the additional sentence that's in your staff report.
So we're at 10% open space, which must also include a dedicated amenity or recreational feature. The dedicated amenity or recreational feature cannot be in the stormwater detention tract, but the stormwater detention count towards the 10%.
Right, well, it can't be in the basin, the area that actually would potentially fill up with water for a short period of time. Usually 24 hours they're supposed to drain.
Okay, got it. Questions for Brett?
I wanted to know what Justin thought of it.
I love it.
Perfect. That's coming.
Well, that was my only comment, because what I was getting at was specifically the comments you made the last couple times this came up about if you made it separate from the detention base, it would exceed the percentage, and it would cut down on a developer's available land to develop on. So I was wondering if this addressed that comment.
Yeah, so we can still put the amenity within the detention basin tract, but the amenity cannot be within the area where the stormwater collects.
Got it. Okay.
And this fits it just fine. So the other one was saying we needed additional 10%.
That's what I was getting at was, does this language sufficiently address that concern that you had?
So, Brad, if there are open space dedication, the minimum lot size is 5,500 square feet. In the front and rear yard, setbacks are reduced 5 feet.
That is correct. So you could have a slightly smaller lot.
So on item 6, we've got a front yard of 25 feet, would that be 20?
No, we're just talking about the lot size itself. The setbacks remain the same. So they could make a little bit smaller lot. So the front setback would still be 25 feet. It's just the lot would be smaller.
Okay, but as I read this statement, it says front and rear yard setback reduced by
open space dedication, the way I read this, is the front yard setback's 20.
Yes.
Okay.
The rear yard's 15.
Yeah, you're correct. Sorry, I stand corrected. The front and rear setbacks are reduced by 5 feet.
So in the final version, those will be changed.
No,
No, it would stay that same way,
It's
but
just if they do the open space dedication, then they can reduce it 5 feet. The standard's still 25 and 20, but they get a 5-foot discount.
So the side yard reduction applies to the 6,000 square foot lot?
yes. But that's not in play with the 10% open space. It is just a reduction to 5 feet, which is consistent with what we did at the R3 and the R2 setbacks.
But for Chad's benefit, because you haven't had the joy of.
Oh. Chad, you don't want the joy.
We should really start over.
This is a zone that we have had on our books for a while and we have never used. We are now deciding to try to use it. And what it does is it encourages single-family development on small lots, smaller lots. We have dropped the lot size requirements for R2, which allows for single or multiple duplex development. We didn't do that for R1. So R1A, part of this is, well, if we do it for R2, why wouldn't we do it for R1A? My argument against all of it is, one, I don't know we want to encourage this kind of development. And two, even if we did, you have the potential that this could be used in areas where you're basically planning out a whole new subdivision and you're going to put up a bunch of houses 5 feet apart from each other. And I don't like it. So I have been consistently a naysayer on this thing, but I think I'm the only one.
No, you're not.
No.
I don't like it. I think it's not, and I get the fact that we've had developers who come to us and says, I want to do single family residential, but I want to have an R2 with the smaller lot size. We have permitted that to happen. And the argument is, well, it makes it easier to convince the neighbors that you're not going to create these noxious duplexes if I allow for single family on the smaller lot size. And there's a market for that. And the argument has been that, we want to help create affordable housing in our community. And this is one way to do it, by reducing the lot sizes. And all of those have merit. My concern with it is that this opens up the opportunity for greenfield development in places where otherwise they might have actually built a standard R1, but they're doing R1A just to make more money, and it bothers me. So that's my take on the history. You guys feel free to correct.
I second that.
My only reservation has been the point that I asked Justin about, so I don't feel as passionately as these guys do, but the only reason why is because we had a developer come in and tell us he chose R2 because that was the only thing that allowed for the smaller lot sizes. So we still allow for it in our zoning, it's just R2, and R2 allows for multifamily, whereas R1 would only single family. So, or, sorry, R1A. So I generally think we shouldn't introduce complexity when we don't need to. However, I do think that this does address the need for single family development with smaller lot sizes, if you want to encourage such a thing.
Like you said, that's why there's several.
The issue has been framed for you, Jeff.
Yeah.
So we're looking to make a recommendation to City Council to consider this text amendment if that's the action you would take tonight?
Correct, yes. And the city council did ask to bring this back to the planning commission after we talked about the R2A, so they are expecting a recommendation.
So you don't think they agree with it?
I'm not gonna speak for the council.
That's okay.
Does it make any difference?
That's okay. So, further discussion, motion?
I guess I'm of the opinion that whether or not a developer uses R1 or R1A or R2 is market rate. My experience is there's, not a tremendous opportunity to make a lot more money in either.
I think that's true.
I think they're all gonna be, in the ballpark. But if people want, one thing that ends up happening a lot of times in these types of developments is, you get old people like me who don't wanna mow their lawn, and you can afford to create an area with maintenance provided. It's a lot harder to do with the 7,000 square foot lot and the bigger setbacks and all that. So I think there is a market for this. And my opinion, what I've seen, you don't get cheap houses. If you've got an area where there's a market for cheap houses, you're gonna get cheap houses, whether it's R1 or R1A. If they can sell cheap houses, they're gonna build them. If people are looking for brick fronts and three-car garages, they're gonna find a way to stick them in. So that, in my opinion, is this allows some more flexibility for the city. I would think it's
Brad, have we ever talked about fire, hazards? These are so close together. If there's a bad fire, a house goes up, good heavens, with them that close together, isn't the next one gonna catch on fire and just run
Well,
right down the line?
that's an interesting point you bring up, Commissioner, because by code, if you don't fireproof the soffits of the house, they can only be 6 feet close. So there'd be 52-foot wide lots, but this does you can fireproof the soffits, which is generally a heavier material, thicker. So if somebody does want to use the 5-foot setbacks, they will have additional fireproofing requirements per
And actually,
city,
the houses in
per the
Beth
building
Branch
code.
By 10 feet, they'll be 10 foot apart.
Yeah, and actually, they will be 10 feet apart, 5 on each side.
So then the soffit will be 6.
And it's 10 foot as opposed to 14. Straight on.
If we were to make a motion, do we need to include the modified text amendment for the front and rear if they're taking advantage of the amenity?
It's there.
Yeah, you would have to
Okay.
approve all of the language in red.
Yeah, I don't think there's a modification.
We don't have to do anything there? Okay, all right.
You agree with that?
Yeah.
So is this something that we can present to the city council, so we should recommend to the city council to either approve it or not?
Correct.
Okay. Looking for a motion to recommend or approval or deny?
I would move that we recommend this R1A residential zoning to the city council as presented.
Second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz,
No.
Lane,
No.
Templin,
No.
Huggins,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Milburn.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Brad. It was Jones' work. I'm sorry to get back into that.
Well, it wasn't quite as bad as the Playhouse one. It was close.
We're giving you a break.
That one was a good one.
Yeah.
Item 6B, noting that Commissioner Milburn has left the room.
All right,
Mission Custom Foods Warehouse North Elevation.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, we do have a request from Custom Foods. Actually, the Planning Commission did approve the site plan for this construction, and it is under construction as we speak. The applicant is here tonight. If you've got any questions specifically about the reason for the change, but there were some supply chain issues on some of the materials that were to be placed on the corners for the architectural amenities required in our city code. The applicant asked me if I could approve those, and I said, I felt like those were significant enough that they needed to come back before the Planning Commission ultimately for approval. You do have in your packet a image showing what the proposed changes are, and ultimately my recommendation is to approve the proposed changes. Because initially, if this would have come, regardless of supply issues, things like that, if it would have initially come with that stonework that they are asking for now, I would have recommended that several months ago. So I didn't feel like there was any kind of real conflict. I don't believe we're bending over backwards or changing rules for anybody, because we're bringing it back to the Planning Commission for a recommendation. So you can see that the brick stonework is going away and it's being replaced more with that lighter block material, but it's still a masonry finish that would be along the corners. And as you know, we talked about our architectural standards and trying to emphasize corners and also having the windows, things like that, that break up long expanses of the front of the building. So that's the revised drawings from the architect. And I did want to mention, and I did put that in the staff report, that when we talked about this location earlier, that wanted some additional plantings along the north side of the building, and a revised landscape plan has been submitted and approved by myself and then sent on to the building official for as part of the checklist that they'll be looking at before issuing a temporary occupancy permit. So with that, I do recommend the approval and open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brad. Questions for Brad?
So Brad, if this cast stone option treatment for the corners of the building had been presented when it was first brought in, it would have been within codes?
That is correct, yes.
So I don't have any objection to the swap. I will say that I continue to be surprised that our standards don't require a more attractive overall structure than this. And I think we maybe ought to look at it. And I know that this one here is tucked behind the existing plant, and there's a lot of good reasons why we shouldn't jump up and down about it, but they built a bunch of new warehouses up in North Kansas City, and I saw the architectural details on those warehouses and the variation in heights and the things that people are being required to do. It was still tilt-up concrete construction and all of the things we see here, but I think we probably ought to look at our standards again. And not to say that this one is in any way unattractive, but by that same token, we can do better than that. And I use this as the platform to say, let's look at those requirements again.
I do agree with you on the elevation changes. I got a little bit more requirement for variation there.
Yeah, I mean, it's tucked behind the other building, and I've never really had a problem with any of it. Certainly, this swap doesn't.
So do we do anything other than just got our?
If you could make a motion and.
Motion to approve the change.
Correct.
I'll make a motion that we approve the changes as submitted.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call. Unless you want to say something.
Okay. Martin,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins,
Yes.
Maddox,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So, item 7A, just an item for presentation on a future SUP, so I gather we don't have an SUP, but they just want to talk about
Yeah, that is correct. And what I like to do typically
it.
when we,
Commissioners have any objection to that?
yeah, what I like to do is, before we go right to a public hearing, get some initial feedback from the planning commission on the submittal, because a special use permit is, once again, a special use. It's not something it's not granted by right. It's something that does need to, like I mentioned earlier, get down in the weeds with and look at all the specifics of the use, talking about noise, traffic, dust, landscaping, fencing, screening, architectural features. A lot of things go into a special use permit. So that's why I thought it was appropriate to bring this up earlier. And you're right, we did talk with Geiger and we did grant them a 3-year, which is actually short for a special use permit use over by the Panasonic building with not a lot of requirements other than stipulation that they pay some money into the maintenance of Astra Parkway that's gravel that the city will have to take care of and maintain. But ultimately, their goal was to find a more permanent location. And they were well aware from our previous discussions that this would kick in all the things that we would look at for a special use permit. And so the location that they have presented to city staff and the packet that's in your report it's not something we've supplied any comments to Geiger about, but I did want to give it to the planning commission, get your initial feedback and comments. I think we got a lot of it with the rezoning discussion, but I did want to just point out a few things that, at least initially, we've had discussions with the developers, provide obviously a complete site plan. We would limit or request a 20-year time frame for the special use permit with no carryovers. It would have to come back to the planning commission in 20 years after the operation opens. The road would have to be paved from the batch plant all the way up to the Evening Star roundabout. Once again, also the appropriate utilities aside would have to be put into place. And at this point, we obviously couldn't require that those be installed, but it would have to be installed prior to the opening of the batch plant. But they do have letters from probably the most key one, which is the Water 7, saying that they would be able to supply water to that location. And then obviously to comply with all Kansas and federal permits. I've also included in your packet the standards for issuing a special use permit. Now, we don't have any, this is actually a manufacturing permit. It falls under, it's not a sand plant, it's not a mining or operation. If you remember when we went through this with the Ham Quarry, they actually have a sand operation with their batch plant. And they were together, so we had to look at not just the information required for a concrete batch plant, but also for the mining and quarrying. And this is just for the manufacturing, basically making concrete. And so it has a little less stringent, but not totally stringent. There isn't the requirement for outreach to the neighbors, holding, I guess, neighborhood meetings, things like that. But there are some requirements that were touched on earlier that, as far as the noise and the dust and some of the things, the operating hours, that's something we spent a lot of time with the Ham Quarry on how long they would be operating, what days of operation. So those are the types of things I'd like to get some feedback from the Planning Commission as we have this discussion. And I do think really a lot of things that we talked about during the rezoning is now the appropriate time to jump into it with special use permit, because that is what was driving that rezoning application, at least the initial phase of it. Could potentially be some light industrial buildings and warehousing, but this is the first, I guess, real development proposal for this location, even on Evening Star. So with that, I'd like to hear information from Planning Commission. Actually, also, the applicant would like to address the Planning Commission. They do have a prepared PowerPoint presentation. I think it'd be appropriate to hear that and then just move on with your feedback. So if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Any objections? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Second one? Oh.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Chad Tenpenny, and I reside in Leawood, Kansas, 5004 West 131st Street. I serve as the general counsel for Geiger Ready Mix, and it's good to be in front of this body again. I want to thank Mr. Weisenberger for his counsel and comments, and briefly highlight a couple of items, and then introduce our Geiger team. Geiger Ready Mix is a 133-year-old locally owned and operated company with roots in Leavenworth. Geiger is headquartered in Kansas City, Kansas, and has 7 ready-mix concrete batch plants throughout the Kansas City metro area. 5 of those are fixed locations, 2 of them are mobile, and one of those mobile sites is here on the DeSoto Astra Enterprise Park. That mobile plant has been a focus of constructing, or has been focused on constructing Panasonic. And when the city granted the special use permit in July of 2024, we've also had the privilege to supply concrete out into the community for infrastructure and housing projects. So that's been a success. Geiger employs over 250 team members, including at least a dozen here in DeSoto. And we are hiring, Mr. Chairman. These are good jobs. First-year ready-mix truck drivers can earn $80,000 a year. Experienced drivers can earn $100,000. The company motto is on time and hustle, and Geiger works really hard to do things the right way. Geiger Ready Mix is here this evening to ask for a special use permit for 20 years at 103rd and Evening Star for purpose of operating a fixed batch plant.
Chad, I don't mean to break your train here, but you have not applied for a special use permit, correct? This is not in front of us tonight for action.
Thank you for correcting me, Mr. Chairman,
Just
and
asking for
clarify.
discussion.
This is a discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we believe in the future of DeSoto and want to be a partner in responsibly and strategically growing the community. As you heard earlier, Geiger Ready Mix is working closely with Mr. Anderson and is a key part of his development. With his counsel, Geiger has agreed to invest over $1 million in a concrete Evening Star Road. All told, Geiger estimates that it will invest $15 million in order to locate and construct this fixed batch plant. Addressing your earlier question, Mr. Maddock, regarding the special use permit on the Panasonic facility, if we're fortunate enough to get approval through the city here for this fixed plant, that other special use permit will go away.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce our Geiger team. President and CEO Todd Geiger is here. He'll be available to answer any questions you might have. But first, I want to introduce Mark Brewer, who is our consulting engineer with Schlegel Associates, who can give a more technical review of this project. Mark.
Thank you, Commissioners. As Chad mentioned, my name is Mark Brewer with Schlegel, 14920 West 107th and Lenexa. I think this slide here is a good one to start out with, mainly just identify some plant elements or some site elements that some of the concerns were brought up during the rezoning application. So we'll start with this, and I'll kind of point out the elements, and then we'll move on to the actual site plan that we're hoping to submit and kind of point out those same elements on that site plan. So probably the best examples in the upper right, that the tall structure there. I don't want to blind Mr. Brockhauer.
Oh, yeah.
But so this is the plant itself. So all the mixing, all the activity is happening in here. This will be, and I'll point it out, this is the office and maintenance building that'll be associated. This is a covered conveyor, and it's hard to see here, but all aggregate and material, so all the rock and sand is stored in underground bunkers. So this extends underground, so all that material is stored underground. So these plants are all, the design of their facilities have kind of evolved over the years. So these have been built over the past 30 or 40 years. So what we hope to bring to DeSoto is kind of the best iteration of that. So I'll point out these elements as we go on to the site plan. But all these will have kind of the enclosed plant, a maintenance building, and kind of this aggregate bunker. So this, is that Lee Summit? I'm sorry. And this one is the Olathe plant down here that people you may be familiar with. And this is the original Leavenworth plant, I believe. So again, the plant, the aggregate conveyor, and the underground bunker.
You get your drivers to park that good, or did you do that for the picture?
Strict military.
There you go.
So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So just identifying the site, I think we've talked about this at length, but just where we're located off of Evening Star on the southern half of the rezoning that was just heard. And here's the Flint development area, and then of course K10 and Evening Star. Hop on the next one if you don't mind. Brad and I didn't compare notes, but this is the comp plan, so I think we've ran through this enough. So we can go ahead and move on. Yeah, sorry, you got to zoom out a little
Got
bit.
it.
So,
Is that good?
yep, thank you. So this is Evening Star here over on the right side of the page. So just walking through the typical activities, I guess maybe I should point out the site elements first. So here's the maintenance shop. Here will be the office. This is that conveyor. This is the underground storage area. This is the employee parking lot, and you can see kind of the trucks lined up here. So typical daily activities, and I think the traffic counts were presented in your packet is, but the trucks will come in from this northern entrance and then drive into the plant. There's an overhead door on both sides of this. So this plant is considered a wet batch plant, so water is added at the plant, so you don't have a lot of spinning outside of the plant. And all that loading of the truck will happen indoors inside this facility. Truck will pull out, they will test the slump of the concrete, and then exit the site to deliver. If I screwed that up,
You did a good job.
let me know. And then I think the estimates were about at max were 100 loads of concrete a day is what this plant would generate. So that's operating 8 to 10 hours a day, 100 loads, 200 trips. There's about 25 employees that will be at this site. So, and then also there will be aggregate or material deliveries throughout the day and cement. I recognize a couple engineers on the board, so you understand cement and concrete are different things. So we've got cement trucks and concrete trucks on this site, but there'll be 7 to 10 sand and rock trucks and other materials, and then I think we said 3 to 5 cement trucks a day that will load the plant. At the end of the day, the trucks will return to this washout area where they'll be washed out with recycled water. All the water from the washout flows into this basin. There'll be a series of weirs that'll separate the sand and rock, and the water will be reclaimed, pumped back up to this location, and they were used as water on the truck, as well as recycled for washout water. So that's a pretty, there's no discharge of any plant waste into the environment, any of the detention basins, anything of that nature. So all water is captured from this kind of slump location from the plant and directed to here. While I'm talking about detention, this was kind of the area we had identified as kind of the existing waterway for detention. It's not shown on here, there's likely the need for another detention basin over here, as we were playing with kind of this boundary, but this makes sense, for detention as well. And all that will be designed according to the city's applicable design criteria and codes. I think that gives a good, I guess I didn't mention the material. These are kind of the bulk material storage locations, so there will be some outside storage potentially. These are made with the remnant blocks from short loads coming back to the plant where they just cast the blocks into place. So they'll use these here for specialty aggregates or any other specialty material that may go into the concrete plant. I think that pretty well covered the site plan. I might just touch on utilities while you're here. So like we will have a water line and gas line extended down Evening Star, working with the land developer. Sanitary right now is anticipated to be extended up the existing waterway, which kind of comes through this eastern third of the site. For the interim, in the absence of a gravity sanitary sewer, this will likely be on a septic system, given the relatively low employee count here. And we'll mark off an area to remain undisturbed over here for that septic system. I think that covers everything on that. I may stop there if anybody has any questions, or I'll keep rolling.
Well, if you drive by, there's gonna be no aggregate outside, it'll all be underground or.
Correct. If you scroll a couple down, there's some elevations that we can show. One more, please. One more. So this is the outside aggregate storage. So if you can imagine, this is the surface grade right here.
Yep.
In between these yellow bollards are 10 hoppers, if you will, where the tandem truck will back up, dump into this. And there's grates right here, and all the material will fall down approximately 30 feet. If you scroll to the next sheet, it'll give you a cross section of the plant. So in this corner here, this is now viewing where they dump the aggregate, and it goes into these hoppers, conveyor belt under all that.
Sorry.
Nope, you're good. So conveyors collect all that, and then up the conveyor to the plant. All of these systems are run off compressed air, all the gates and valves, all electric belts. So this will be almost inaudible because all of this is happening down below grade. And everything happening in here, all electric motors, all electric belts, and all enclosed in a pre-engineered metal building. That metal building is about 85 feet tall.
So the only thing you'll see outside is the conveyors.
Correct. For the aggregate storage. Now there may be the specialty aggregates. If you look at any aerials on Ames or wherever else on Google Earth or any of the other plants, from time to time there are specialty aggregates that you have to put in the mix, and so those are stored outside. But the whole intent of this whole system is to remove the wheel loader from the loading system. So all that noise, all that dust, all that traffic, all the spillage of aggregate, all that is removed from the system. It all goes down the hoppers, and it's a much more clean and efficient process.
So you said specialty aggregates are stored outside and wouldn't be delivered by that conveyor.
Correct.
So would that be loaders?
Yeah, there's.
that to the plant?
Correct, but I don't know what a percentage of their plant that would be, but
The idea is not to move the material twice. So we want to dump it into the bunker like Mark explained, but to clarify, Mark said that there will be some material outside, but 80–90% is just through the bunkers.
Will that be shielded from the road?
I'm sorry?
Will that be shielded from the road?
We get into we can scroll up a couple to the buffer, the landscape plan, right there. So you can see the grade falling down this way. So this is back 1,000 feet from the road. And then we have the required landscape buffer here. In the packet, there's the Ameristar wrought iron fence with the precast columns along the front. And that'll extend back 200 feet from the right-of-way. So that'll all go along here. Currently, only signage is proposed on the building itself, similar to the elevations provided in the packet. So talked about the general site operation and those plant elements, touched on the utilities. Again, we have the will serve letter from the Water 7, talked about the sewer and gas. We have an email from Atmos that they have the ability to serve the site. Obviously, all these things require improvements, but and then the previous application touched on the benefit district with the Evening Star Road improvements. Mentioned the buffers. Mr. Geiger did pass along that they do have a sweeper truck that they run between their plants periodically to sweep up any loose aggregate or anything to try to maintain those dust levels low and address any concerns. And we have applied for a state NOI, land disturbance permit, and have received no negative impact from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks and the Historical Society.
Sorry, thought I had it off.
Again, I think that covers most of what I wanted to cover. I don't know if I've missed anything, but happy to answer any more questions you might have.
Do you mind, just curious, there's improvements that are coming along for Evening Star Road. How far down does it go? Where will you actually pave out to?
To our southern boundary, that probably doesn't paint it.
It's a half mile south.
Okay.
Right.
So considerably past the plant is kind of what I was asking.
No.
Yeah.
Right about to it.
Right about to the
The
plant.
south
Okay.
line.
Both drives will be, both plant access locations will have access to that road.
Okay.
And Geiger will be paying for that whole 2,500 feet.
That's, my understanding is being worked out with the developer, but they have a financial commitment for their pro rata portion or whatever the terms of that agreement may be.
The city will not be paying for it.
Correct.
It's
I
privately
can verify that.
Privately financed.
Right now.
Mr. Bungart made that clear too.
Mike, what's that crossroad right there?
So 103rd, obviously.
Yeah.
The south line of the subject property is this is the subject property.
That's
Yeah.
about 107th Street.
Is that what that crossroad
Yeah.
is? Okay.
Yeah, on the south line.
So would it be safe to assume that it just is going to stop at 107th then?
Yes.
It's safe to assume it's not gonna go any further than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Where's 111th Street on there?
It's down here.
So it's gonna be on the corner of Evening Star and 100?
No, they're proposing this for right here.
Okay, where the house is.
Yeah, the house is here. The site is here, and then 111th is down here.
Mm-hmm. So if you drive by this site, it's gonna be hard to tell it's a concrete plant.
Besides, it's gonna be easy when you come from the north, because there's no buffering at north on your landscaping at all.
That was because it's like zoning to the north. And so with like zoning, a buffer is not required. And again, we haven't gotten any.
Definitely gonna get a good view of it coming down the road.
So, to your point, that screen wall, the decorative fence and cast-in-place columns is proposed to be extended 200 feet from the right-of-way. But I see your point. I mean, this landscaping could potentially be extended as well. We haven't gotten any feedback from city staff yet, so that may be something that we work out with them.
But that then begs the question, why are we here? I mean, I appreciate that you guys are asking for input, and that's great, but we don't have an application in front of us. We haven't gotten feedback from city staff yet. Why are we doing this tonight?
Well, maybe Brad can shine some light on that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, when we've had these special use permits in the past, rather than just spring and actually an application has been made, but it was after our deadline, so it couldn't have been on this planning commission meeting, but I thought it was important to at least get this in front of the planning commission and see if there are any, red flags, something like this. And now you brought up the landscaping to the north. That's something that I think is a valid point, and Mark is correct. I mean, it is like zoning, and so our buffers in the code are different, but because it is a special use permit, planning commission has the ability to put on some additional requirements. But that's kind of what was wanting planning commission to give us some initial feedback on this versus just dropping a concrete batch plan on you in a public hearing, and at least give you some time to, and ultimately you still have time to contact myself or Mike about anything you might come up with in a week, so it isn't just, this moment and snapshot in time. And I think it's important to give you an opportunity to see these things before a public hearing just, like I said, gets dropped on your lap, so.
Well, I would just like to have the staff have had a position on it before they bring it to us, because I don't know enough about this. I mean, this isn't my day job, so.
If you're looking for feedback and commentary, I know the last, and by the way, it's great context. I did not realize that this was not an incremental plant. This is to move into from a temporary home to a permanent home. However, when we did the one on 83rd, the re-up of that special use permit, there was specific guidelines around dusk and dawn and uses and all those things. We would assume the same things would be involved in this special use permit?
Absolutely, correct, yes.
Do we know what they're asking for on that?
That was kind of what I was getting at, because frankly, I hadn't read through the whole packet with their commentary, but I know that was a point of discussion with the last special use permit that we did.
5 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays? So I guess we didn't know what they're asking for.
Yeah, and we'll define more of the trips and things like that was brought up, 100 loads a day of concrete, but obviously there'll be aggregate material deliveries and employees coming and going, so we'll get a better handle on those type things. And those are some things I've talked with Joe about, what he wants to see as far as even, we're gonna present probably a cross-section of the road, how it's gonna look, some of those types of issues as well. But we just didn't have time from the time this application was submitted to give them all that feedback, but I just felt it was important to get it out in front of you, so it's like, here, this is coming. It's gonna be on the March agenda as a public hearing.
Well, if our feedback's gratuitous, my gratuitous feedback would be, I think this is a great design. I think this is a fabulous way to do a concrete plant, and I certainly appreciate the thoughtfulness that comes into having this kind of a design so that you are not a menace to your neighbors. I appreciate that. That said, there are things obviously that need to be talked about, and we do rely heavily on staff to kind of ferret these things out. So listen to them, because if they tell you that something's going to be a problem, it's probably going to be a problem.
Like paying for that road.
Like paying for that road.
I guess one question I would have, we saw a picture of Evening Star Road as a thoroughfare.
Yeah.
And are we going to account for the fact that if it does become a thoroughfare, we can get that?
Yeah.
We're gonna need a lot more right of way than 6.
Yeah, interesting discussion, a lot, but you're right, we're gonna need more right of way than your typical, what's there now for sure. I'm not sure what's shown here.
60 feet.
Okay,
On
we
our
might
side.
need a little more, yeah. There's also, to that point, KDOT has their corridor study now that has interchange improvements for Evening Star and 103rd that don't keep the roundabout they just built, right? So it comes down, so we were having those conversations with Mr. Anderson. KDOT's indicated within that corridor study that if there is ever a north-south connector that links up, say K10 to I-35, the best place for it to connect to K10 is right here at Evening Star, and that's why the interchanges would be significantly different than it. So those are things we're gonna, as this area develops, we're gonna have to keep in mind. As far as that road corridor, our big thick yellow line, it's a pretty line, isn't it? But we don't have any money to do any of that yet, but.
But this would be the time to
Preserve the
space.
corridors, preserve the right of way, that's exactly, yeah, you're exactly right.
But the
Yeah.
vast majority of that's on Astra, and they're not gonna agree to preserve anything yet, right?
Well, in a way, part of another independent effort we're doing, not independent, but with us, Johnson County, Douglas County, KDOT, is to establish future road corridors through Astra, because that have been cut off for 80 or 90 years now, and how those would tie in east and west, north and south. And so that document is coming, and we plan to present that to the council, hopefully get adoption on it, incorporate that into our future land use plans, so that we can preserve those. And we've done it. I mean, we're not doing it in a vacuum. It's in cooperation with the Astra folks, and they're in favor of this connection that starts at Evening Star and heads south in a manner that we've shown it. So those are all very relevant and very important discussions to have when you're looking at something like this. Especially when, in this case, there appears to be a little room to scooch stuff back if you had to, right? So if we need another 30 feet, it wouldn't kill the project, right? So.
And, eventually it could benefit.
Oh, greatly, yeah.
So they have access to it. They may not.
Well,
What kind of roads you construct.
that's one of the questions, is where are you gonna get access on?
Yeah. I mean, the line is one thing, the nature of the corridor is another, because there's been talk about a fully access controlled, grade separated freeway. There's been talk about kind of just like a major arterial type of thing, and kind of everything in between.
Has anybody ever talked about taking it up Dice Avenue?
Oh, historically, yeah. Not in the current.
You mean like a 21st century parkway kind of thing?
Oh, don't stop.
Is that what you're talking about?
Don't.
Okay.
It's not what anybody's talking about anymore,
okay.
Mr. Chairman.
That's a nightmare we haven't really brought up for a while.
Well, you know, obviously live in this town too.
But very interesting discussions and relevant here.
Not that this really affects the applicant that much, I don't think it's going to be the city.
Absolutely.
Well, do work with staff, do refine your application. We will have a public hearing. We'll get to use your graphics again for all of that, so that's great. Anything else that you all would like to add to that for just comment?
One question, how does this compare 100 trucks a day to your other plant?
We would, it's probably our third or fourth busiest. We would anticipate to try to build it up to get more traffic. But to start off with, it wouldn't be one of our busiest plants. The growing area, hopefully, it would become one.
What is your maximum trucks per day?
Double.
200 trucks
But that wouldn't be every day. That's set up for a large pour somewhere where you would be supplying a project.
Right. And the warehouses are the bigger pours. They're mostly just the residential. Wouldn't even be the 100, be the 50. So it's, the 100 right now is probably our max. But as we would build up the workload or have the more work, the potential for that number to increase will be there.
And in proportion to what is coming out of Panasonic at 515,
Wouldn't even notice the difference.
Be small compared to the overall what's going on in the area.
It's true. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our agenda. Any other discussion items, motion? Mike?
Reminder, Commissioners, a workshop, joint workshop with City Council, March 6th, 5:30 PM, to talk about the initial findings of the Southwest Growth Area Plan. If you've gotten the invitation, I know you probably haven't, I'll make sure you get that. Anybody get that calendar invite?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Is the council gonna meet it?
Is that a request?
Are
we gonna be hungry?
Will there be snacks?
We can make sure snacks are available.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Fine. Motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition? Nope. We are adjourned. Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
I can't think of a better way to spend it.
Oh, 50.